You know, everybody that I've ever worked with is a part of my being here tonight to accept this award.
For 30 years, Audrey Meadow kept her mouth shut. She smiled in interviews. She thanked Jackie Gleason publicly. She protected the magic of the honeymooners. But in 1994, 2 years before she died, she finally exposed Gleason. Behind the laughs was a man who refused to rehearse, who went silent for days, who made everyone tiptoe around his moods. The truth about television's most beloved couple was darker than anyone imagined. Audrey Meadow was born far from Hollywood in Wuchang, China, on February 8, 1922. Her parents were American missionaries. They had already spent over 10 years in China when Audrey arrived, the youngest of 4 children. Their home was surrounded by the echoes of revolution, political chaos, and a culture completely different from anything in America. Wuchang had been a hotspot during the 1911 revolution that brought down the Qing dynasty, and the region remained unstable throughout the 1920s. That's where Audrey's earliest memories were made. She played among Chinese children, heard Chinese songs, and lived her first 5 years without speaking a word of English. She returned to the United States in 1927. The family settled in Rhode Island, where her father became a cathedral rector. Suddenly, Audrey was a little girl in a cold New England city, unable to speak the language around her. She had to learn English from scratch. But that didn't erase her first language. Audrey had spoken fluent Mandarin Chinese. It shaped how she saw the world, giving her an awareness few Americans had. That skill, the ability to adapt, became a pattern in her life. But home was never simple. Audrey's older sister, Jane Meadows, had already begun her rise in show business. She was the elegant one, the dramatic actress, the rising Hollywood star. She signed with MGM in 1944 and quickly found herself acting alongside legends. Audrey, meanwhile, started with music. She could sing like a bird and had a fire of her own, but she lived in Jane's shadow. The comparisons stung. People noticed the rivalry. There were times when the sisters didn't speak, especially after Audrey married airline executive Robert Six. Jane wasn't happy about that. Over time, their relationship softened. After Six's death in 1986, they became close again. Fame couldn't undo the bond they shared. Audrey's path to fame started with her voice. At just 16, she performed at Carnegie Hall as a coloratura soprano. That stage was meant for legends, and Audrey held her own. She then joined opera companies in Detroit, Louisville, and Chicago, performing lead roles in musicals like Roberta and Anything Goes. But it was her sister Jane who nudged her toward acting. Jane saw something in Audrey that others hadn't: comedic timing, charisma, a presence that lit up a room. Audrey took a chance. She auditioned for the musical Top Banana and landed a key role alongside Phil Silvers. It changed everything. It opened on November 1st, 1951, at the Winter Garden Theater and ran until October 4th, 1952. That's 350 performances. Every single night, she stood beside Phil Silvers and played Betty Dillon, a role that demanded sharp timing and constant energy. The show poked fun at the chaos behind television, and it moved fast. She had to sing, dance, and deliver punchlines with perfect precision. Working alongside a giant like Silvers was no easy task. He was loud, unpredictable, and always in motion. But Audrey kept up. She learned when to stay quiet and when to jump in for the laugh. She later called it her comedy boot camp. Night after night, she adjusted to his improvising and matched his pace. That pressure built her confidence. It taught her to stay cool, even when everything was moving too fast. By the end of the run, she had something few young actresses ever got: proof. Proof she could hold her own in the spotlight. Proof she could handle anything live theater threw at her. And that mattered, because television was about to change everything. After Top Banana, Audrey moved from the stage to the screen. In 1951, she joined The Bob and Ray Show on NBC. The show only ran for 15 minutes at a time. but it was packed with absurd skits, fake news, and wild parodies. It was chaotic, unscripted, and fast, and it was perfect for her. Audrey didn't just sing, she played characters. One moment she was a soap opera star, the next she was delivering a fake weather report with a straight face. The rehearsal time was minimal, the pace was brutal. There was no safety net, but she thrived. She learned how to switch roles instantly and how to survive when things went wrong. That quick thinking became her signature. It was during this time that she caught Jackie Gleason's attention. He thought she was too polished at first, too glamorous to play the tough, no-nonsense Alice Kramden. But something about her timing, her poise, and the way she held the scene even in chaos made him reconsider. This little comedy show gave her a chance. She grabbed it and never let go. But none of it came easy. Long before Broadway lights and TV cameras, Audrey was just another young woman trying to make it in New York. She lived at the Rehearsal Club, a cramped brownstone on West 53rd Street. John D. Rockefeller Jr. helped fund it. Dozens of women packed into small rooms, 5 to a space, sharing one bathroom and one closet stuffed to the ceiling. Rent was $40 a week, meals included. Privacy didn't exist. Fame didn't either. Everyone was chasing the same dream. Some of her housemates would go on to become icons: Lucille Ball, Katharine Hepburn, Ginger Rogers. Others vanished into the city, never heard from again. Audrey worked odd jobs and scraped together enough money to survive. Sometimes the club put on shows to attract agents. Sometimes she wore borrowed clothes just to look the part. There were laughs, tears, and endless rejections. But inside that crowded brownstone, she found the grit she would need later, the courage to keep going, the toughness to take a punch and smile anyway. When Audrey Meadows first walked in to audition for The Honeymooners, she didn't even get a chance to speak. Jackie Gleason took one look at her and shot her down. He said she looked too glamorous, too polished, too pretty to play Alice Kramden. In his mind, Alice wasn't elegant. She was rough, tired, and sharp-edged. Meadows didn't fit. He saw someone who looked like she belonged in a cocktail bar, not a cramped Brooklyn kitchen. Meadows already had years of experience. She had Broadway credits, TV roles, and confidence. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Gleason couldn't see past her looks. He had a very clear image of Alice, a woman hardened by life, not someone with movie star charm. That snap judgment nearly erased her from one of television's most iconic roles. But Audrey didn't cry over it. She got to work. The next morning, she stripped away everything that made her look polished. She pulled her hair back, scrubbed off her makeup, threw on an old dress, and posed for a photo that would change her career. She looked like she hadn't smiled in years. She mailed the picture to Gleason. When he saw it, he didn't even realize it was the same woman he'd rejected. He slammed his hand down and shouted, "That's Alice!" Just like that, she had the part. What no one talked about at the time was why the role had opened up in the first place. The original Alice, Pert Kelton, didn't leave because of illness, like CBS claimed. She was blacklisted. Her husband had marched in a May Day parade, and in the paranoia of the Red Scare, that was enough to ruin both their careers. Kelton had never even voted, but guilt by association was all it took. Her name vanished from the credits, and Audrey Meadows stepped into a role soaked in political fear and silent censorship. Getting cast was only the beginning. Meadows had to completely reinvent herself. Her real personality didn't match the part at all. She wasn't streetwise. She was elegant and poised. So she started over. She watched people on the street. She changed the way she talked. She even changed how she carried herself. She trained herself to become someone Jackie Gleason would believe. When she finally stepped onto set, there was no trace of the woman who'd walked in weeks before. She became Alice Kramden, and the transformation was so complete that no one questioned it again. But stepping into the spotlight meant stepping into Gleason's world. And that world didn't have room for second chances. Jackie Gleason refused to rehearse. There were no second takes, no do-overs. You got one shot. Live in front of 50 million people. Meadows, who had come from theater, was horrified. She expected weeks of prep. Instead, she got a single read-through at a table, then lights, camera, pressure. One night, a fake steak flew off the plate and into the audience. She had to recover instantly and keep the scene alive. There was no safety net. Gleason believed that real comedy came from chaos, not practice. And when something went wrong, he didn't yell. He froze you out. If you messed up or annoyed him, Gleason wouldn't speak to you. Not for hours, not for days. He'd just turn cold. And when Gleason went silent, the entire room followed. The set would go quiet, and nobody dared speak. It was a psychological freeze-out. Meadows said the silence was worse than any yelling. You never knew when it would end or what triggered it. You just kept working and hoped it passed. Gleason ran the show like a king. Everything needed his approval. Scripts, lines, camera angles. Nothing moved without his word. Writers couldn't change a line. Actors couldn't shift a moment. Even Meadows, with all her talent, had to ask permission before suggesting anything. They rehearsed secretly in her dressing room just to avoid his wrath. Everyone was walking a tightrope, trying not to set him off. And he liked it that way. Every day was a gamble. Gleason's mood ruled everything. One day, he was warm and funny. The next, he was silent or explosive. You never knew what version of him would show up. Meadows had to tiptoe around it, balancing charm with submission. She needed to keep the audience laughing while never outshining Gleason. Their on-screen chemistry came from real-life tension. Jackie Gleason always ended episodes of The Honeymooners with a line that melted hearts. He would look at Alice, his TV wife, and say, "Baby, you're the greatest," then lean in for a kiss. It looked real. It felt real. But it wasn't. Audrey Meadows, who played Alice, later told the truth. Jackie never actually kissed her. Very single one of those kisses was faked. He would tilt his head, lean close, and kiss the air next to her cheek. The camera did the rest. It tricked everyone, even her own family. The illusion worked so well because of how tightly the shots were framed. Jackie would wrap his arms around Audrey in a way that blocked the view. His face would move in just the right way. The camera caught the angle that made it look like their lips touched, but they never did. The show was filmed in the 1950s, and television had strict rules back then. Kissing was a sensitive thing, but this wasn't just about rules. It was also about respect. Jackie and Audrey were professionals. They followed the script, hit their marks, and never crossed personal boundaries. Audrey once told a story about her Aunt Christine. After watching an episode, her aunt said, "Oh, darling, I think Mr. Gleason has a little crush on you when he kisses you like that." Audrey had to smile and break the news. "He doesn't really kiss me," she said. "It just looks that way." In the early 1950s, no one in Hollywood was thinking about reruns. Television was still new. The idea that old shows could bring in money again just didn't cross anyone's mind. But Audrey Meadows had a secret weapon. Her brother, Edward. He wasn't in show business. He was a lawyer. And when Audrey landed her role as Alice Kramden on The Honeymooners, Edward did something no one else thought to do. He added a line to her contract. That line said, if the show ever aired again, Audrey would get paid. At the time, no one else on the cast had anything like that. Not even Jackie Gleason, the star of the show. When the classic 39 episodes started airing in reruns, everyone else got nothing. Audrey kept getting paid. Over the years, those reruns aired again and again, on American TV, on cable, even overseas, and every time another check arrived. It wasn't just a few extra dollars. It turned into millions. Back when she filmed the show, Audrey made about $2,000 per week. That was solid money in the 1950s, but it was nothing compared to what came later. In the 1980s, people in the business started talking. They estimated she had made more from reruns than from anything else in her career. And the payments didn't stop. In the 1990s, she was still getting checks, all because of that one smart clause her brother wrote. Other actors from the show weren't so lucky. Joyce Randolph, who played Trixie, missed out. She didn't have residuals in her contract. The show made millions in syndication, but she didn't see a share. Years later, when old variety show episodes were dug up and aired, she started receiving small payments. But by then, most of the money had already been made. Joyce spoke openly about it. She regretted not having better representation. Her story became a quiet warning for actors everywhere. Protect yourself early, or you may lose out forever. Audrey, though, didn't just rely on one lucky contract. She had a sharp mind. She was a businesswoman in a time when women weren't expected to be. She served as a director at the First National Bank of Denver for 11 years. That made her the first woman ever to hold that position. She didn't just attend meetings. She helped shape decisions. In the 1960s and 70s, this was unheard of. And that wasn't all. Audrey also joined Continental Airlines as an advisory director. She didn't just sit on a board. She made things happen. She helped design uniforms for flight attendants. She shaped the look of the airline's lounges and even helped with the interiors of their planes. Her ideas helped the airline grow. Big names in Hollywood flew Continental because of her. When the company moved its headquarters to Los Angeles, sales jumped by 20%. Audrey wasn't just a face on TV. She was a force behind the scenes. Her personal life had its own drama. She first married Randolph Rouse, a real estate businessman, in 1956. Her father, a clergyman, performed the ceremony. The marriage didn't last. 2 years later, they divorced. Rouse later said it was fun, but being married to a rising star came with pressure. He didn't like being called Mr. Audrey Meadows. Then came Robert F. Six, president of Continental Airlines. They married in 1961 and stayed together until his death in 1986. It was a different kind of marriage. Audrey stepped back from acting to support his work. She became a regular part of his business world. They lived in Beverly Hills, New York, and Denver. It was a true partnership. She had no children, but her marriages showed two completely different lives. One marked by friction, the other by balance. Even in her private life, Audrey kept things clever. On her wedding day in 1956, she sent Jackie Gleason a telegram. It read, "Dear Ralph, so sorry, but I'm becoming a bigamist today, marrying Randy Rouse. Love, Alice." It was a perfect nod to their TV marriage. She stayed close to Gleason for years, despite everything, but there was pain behind the laughs. For decades, Audrey never spoke publicly about what it was like to work with Gleason. She smiled for the cameras. She thanked him in interviews, but inside, it took a toll. Gleason could be brilliant, but also difficult and cruel. Audrey carried that weight in silence. Only in her 70s did she start to speak openly. She wrote letters, gave interviews, and shared her truth. She wasn't bitter. She told it straight. Gleason was a genius. He was also a bully. For 30 years, she said nothing. She put the show's legacy above her own comfort. She didn't want to ruin the magic of the honeymooners. She didn't want drama. But eventually, she had to speak. And when she did, it added a new layer to her story. She later said working with Gleason was like walking a tightrope. One moment he was charming. The next he was cold and distant. His temper came without warning. One wrong word, one look he didn't like, and the whole set froze. People tiptoed around him. Meadows had to guess his mood before each take. Sometimes he ignored her completely. Other times he criticized her in front of the crew. But she never lost her grip. She stayed sharp, stayed calm, and gave everything she had to the role of Alice Kramden. That strength didn't come easy. It drained her. The pressure, the fear of being replaced, the silence she had to carry, it all added up, but she never cracked. She became part of television history, even while holding back the weight of it all. When she finally spoke about those years, she didn't go for revenge. She didn't insult him or make a spectacle. She told the truth, without bitterness, She said he was brilliant. She also said he made things hard. Her honesty wasn't meant to tear him down, it was meant to explain what the job really cost her. She kept her dignity, even while describing the chaos. Friends said she rarely spoke badly of him, not even in private. She chose her words carefully. That's what made her story so powerful. She didn't scream it, she simply revealed it. Her quiet truth carried more weight than any loud accusation. For decades, she stayed quiet. Back then, actresses weren't supposed to speak out. They had to smile, stay agreeable, and protect the image of the show. The network needed the honeymooners to look perfect. She knew if she complained, the audience might turn on her. The studio might fire her. So she endured. She kept the peace, not just for herself, but for everyone watching at home. In June 1987, Jackie Gleason was dying. His body was failing, his voice nearly gone, and he was surrounded by quiet and stillness. But then, the phone rang. Audrey Meadow was on the other end. She hadn't worked with Gleason in years, but their bond had never faded. Before she could speak to him, Gleason's wife, Marilyn, picked up. She walked over to Jackie, held the phone gently to his ear, and whispered, "Jackie, it's Audrey. It's your Alice." That name, Alice, was everything. It brought back the old set, the laughter, the black and white glow of the honeymooners. It reminded both of them who they once were. Audrey didn't hesitate. She said what she came to say. "Jackie, I just called to tell you I loved you." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. She thanked him for choosing her to play Alice, for believing in her, for giving her the role that changed her life. Jackie Gleason was barely able to speak by then. But what came next cut through the silence. "I knew what I was doing." His voice was loud, strong, unmistakable. That booming tone had filled living rooms across America. Now, it broke through his weakness to reach her one last time. Meadows would never forget it. She said it was clear as a bell. That single sentence was more than a memory. It was a final gift. He wasn't just complimenting her. He was telling her, even at the end, that she had mattered. Just days later, Gleason passed away on June 24, 1987. That final call still echoed in Meadows' heart. But what came next shocked her. Someone reached out with a request. They wanted her to speak at his funeral, not as Audrey, as Alice, in character. She was horrified. "I told them I would no more come into the kitchen as Alice than I would fly to the moon," she said. "A eulogy? I think that is the worst thing I have ever heard in my entire life." She refused flatly. To her, Ralph Kramden wasn't dead. He never would be. He belonged to television history now, frozen in time. Audrey chose to attend the funeral quietly, without attention or a performance. That was how she honored Jackie, by protecting the magic they had created together. Years later, she faced her own battle. In 1995, Audrey Meadow was diagnosed with lung cancer, but she didn't tell anyone, not even her sister Jane. She kept the illness hidden, locked away from the public. In January 1996, she was admitted to Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles. Just days before her death, the news broke, but by then, the fight was already ending. At 8:50 p.m. on February 3, 1996, she passed away. She was 5 days short of her 74th birthday. Jane later said her sister faced it all with quiet courage. No cameras, no headlines, just dignity. Audrey wanted people to remember her as the woman who brought joy into their homes, not as someone wasting away in a hospital bed. That was the image she left behind. Strong, graceful, unforgettable. But she had one last thing to share before she was gone. In 1994, 2 years before her death, she wrote a memoir called Love, Alice, My Life as a Honeymooner. It wasn't just a book. It was her way of holding on to the truth. The pages told stories from the set, not just the fun moments, but the chaos, the pressure, the brilliance, and the heartbreak. Gleason was a genius, but he was unpredictable. The show was a whirlwind, but in the middle of it all, the cast had a bond that couldn't be broken. She wrote about Art Carney, about Joyce Randolph, about the wild rhythm of live television in the 1950s. She opened up about what it felt like to stand in that kitchen set while millions watched. That book became her voice, long after the lights had dimmed. It still speaks today. Audrey Meadows never wanted applause for her pain. She never sought sympathy. She left behind something better, a legacy of honesty, laughter, and deep, lasting friendship. And in that final moment with Jackie, when he said, "I knew what I was doing," she got her closure. It was simple, powerful, and permanent.